Hey everybody, welcome to this last rendition of Let's Talk Jackson before the primary. Folks, we have made it. We are now literally 2 days out from the primary. And as many of you are aware, some of you guys have been with me since day one. We've been running this campaign now for 6 years, trying to bring true reform and modernization to Jackson County government. And we are literally almost there. That is why before I start this presentation, I have to remind everyone, even if you don't feel like it has value, it does. Please talk to your friends and family members about what's going on in Jackson County, because your vote in this primary is so critical to root out the corruption and the chaos that is going on in our government. And everyone needs to know, because I know that for years we really haven't looked into county government. It's been kind of, in the shadows. But we need to bring light to this darkness, and we need to root out the corruption. And I'm the only candidate that you can promise that will do it. I hope you read my essay that I published today. It's called For the Love of Jackson, and that's what this podcast is also entitled. It's just basically my plea to people, like, for the love of Jackson, please pay attention. There's a lot of distractors in our community right now that are scared of my candidacy because they know that I'm not controlled by special interest groups or organizations, that I'm only controlled by the people. And this terrifies them because they realize that once I become Jackson County executive, that I am going to audit Jackson County government and root out the corruption in our county. And some of them do not want that to happen because people have been profiting off of our dysfunction for years. And we need to stop this from happening. So please call your friends, call your family members, tell them about this primary. Of course, vote no on Amendment 4 and 5, but please vote for Stacey Lake for Jackson County Executive, because we have a clear chance right now to truly put reform and modernization into Jackson County government. Now, before I start my start talking about the new articles of corruption that has come out in Jackson County government, I am going to first just quickly again talk about what's at stake here, okay? A lot of people have told me this, but I'm going to reiterate it, okay? I'm the only candidate right now that's actually running on a plan and policy for the future of Jackson County. A lot of other candidates are either stealing my Jackson plan or basically talking about ideals that really are meaningless, right? From day one, I have been running on a plan that I believe will truly reform and modernize Jackson County government so that we will be one of the top tier county governments in the state of Missouri. But also, we're not trying to reach the best county government in Missouri. I want us to be the best county government in the United States, okay? And the way that I see this is through my Jackson plan, which of course stands for Justice System Reform. As we talked about last week, um, you know, our justice system needs so much help, folks. Not only are our technological systems inferior, and when I say inferior, they haven't really been updated for the past 20 years, but our jail that we just opened up in April has already has had 2 people die in that prison, okay? And as we went over last week, there's a litany of issues going on in a brand new jail that we spent $300 million on, including lack of water, a lack of medical care, and this is unacceptable because a person who's in jail, remember, they're innocent before proven guilty, but every human being deserves to be treated like a human being, okay? And so, justice system reform. I'm 100% for justice system reform, and as your next Jackson County executive, this is one of my a priori issues. But secondly, and this is also just critical, is audit the Jackson County government. Now, we're about to get into what's been going on, at least in the legislature side. But if you've been following me at all, you know the issues of corruption in Jackson County. I've been talking about this for years. We have the auditor's report that came out in 2020 that discovered that our Jackson County government's budget was off by $100 million because of an accounting error. So for years, we weren't utilizing $100 million. And in fact, to this day, I still haven't found any information about what happened to that $100 million when this error was discovered, right? But further on, we get into the new auditor's report that came out this year that again gave Jackson County government the lowest rating possible, folks, for its assessment department issues. And they basically found, and these are findings from the state auditor's office, that of course, and we all knew this, that the Jackson County government wasn't complying with law, that the Board of Equalization wasn't complying with law, and that's why we need to have a department by department audit of Jackson County government to make sure that our departments are working as effectively and efficiently as possible, and also to find out where your tax money is being spent, and ensuring that that your tax money is properly utilized, because as we have seen again this week, our tax dollars are not being properly utilized, folks, and we're going to get into that. But let's now talk about county infrastructure improvements. Our county is a mess, okay? Our buildings are not ADA compliant, and they haven't been for years. That means that our government is not accessible for us all. Our front door has literally been closed for approximately 5 years because the county executive and the Jackson County legislature just can't get together and pass money to fix our front steps, folks, for 5 years, okay? We need a change in leadership. And I'm also going to talk about the change in leadership because you know, people have been saying stuff online about, you know, how I lack experience, and we're going to get to that. But county infrastructure improvements. As your next Jackson County executive, I'm going to make sure that all of our buildings are ADA compliant. I'm not going to continue this trend of just letting things, you know, like putting our maintenance last, right? That's what's basically been going on for years, is we put our building maintenance last, and we haven't set aside the funds to ensure that our county buildings are the best, or the best as possible, not even the best as possible, but just properly maintained, and that's going to change. But also, when I talk about county infrastructure improvements, I'm also talking about the unincorporated areas of Jackson County and making sure that their roads and their needs are also fulfilled, because we've been dropping the ball in unincorporated Jack. And as your next Jackson County executive, I'm going to ensure that unincorporated Jackson County gets the attention that it deserves. Now, next, keeping the taxes affordable. This is why I ran in 2022, was I wanted to prevent another property tax crisis from ever happening again, folks. And as I stated, as your next Jackson County executive, we will never, I repeat, never have another tax crisis again. I'm going to make sure that the assessment department gets 100% reformed, that it's fully in compliance with state law, and that we have a new precedent that actually respects the property owners and not punishes the property owners. This is the first step that we need to take in order to restore the trust in our assessment department. And that is what I'm going to do as your next Jackson County executive. Now, small business support. We haven't been supporting our small businesses. We are so easy to give out hundreds, millions of dollars to out-of-state corporations and leave our small businesses in the dust. And that needs to stop. And as your next Jackson County executive, I am going to focus our attention more so on supporting our small business community rather than out-of-state corporations, because we need to not only protect but grow the businesses that provides the uniqueness to Jackson County. And also, I like to say this for people, but like every $1 that's invested into our small businesses is $5 back in economic prosperity, right? That's a proven statistic. So we need to support small businesses, and that's what I'm 100% going to do as your next Jackson County executive. Ownership initiative for single family households. If you talk to anyone, and I like to say like my age or younger, but it's really all across the spectrum. It's hard to find a house anymore, folks. Our single family houses, the price increases of single family home ownership has greatly increased in the last 10 years, and it has made a lot of single family homes completely unaffordable in our area. A lot of people, and I really want to take my time to discuss this point a little bit. A lot of people believe to solve the crisis that's coming in with housing affordability is to build more apartments. It's like, folks, we need to build more apartments to increase affordable housing in our community. And I'm more so of, hey, why don't we try to make single family home ownership more attainable in our area? Because, and when I say single family home ownership, because I'm not trying to knock on apartments, because it's like you have condos where you can actually have an ownership stake in those apartments, right? I'm talking about giving people more opportunity to purchase property that's going to increase in value over time so they can have an equity stake in our county. And that's what I'm going to do as your next Jackson County executive. As I stated before, one of the reasons why I think our housing prices have skyrocketed over the years is because these out-of-state corporations have been coming into our county and buying up thousands, I repeat, thousands of our single-family homes. And instead of renting them out, they're holding them in their portfolios. So they're sitting on our lands empty, not doing anything, so that when our property assessed values increase, their portfolio value increases as well. Okay, folks? And then they sell it for, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the value. That is not helping us at all. And that's why I believe that the vast property assessment increases are, in my opinion, artificial. I believe that if we had restrictions on those practices that I find extremely, extremely harmful to our community, we would find more housing inventory opening up in our county and more opportunities for people, for families to fill those houses and to be truly invested into Jackson County. Finally, neighbor-to-neighbor transportation plan. This is my promise to create the first county-wide public transportation system that will connect the majority of the cities in Jackson County together through rapid bus transit line. Folks, it's 2026. We don't have a county-wide transit system. That is ridiculous. Jackson County has a population that is over 700,000 people and is actually about to surpass 800,000 people. And currently, we don't even have a bus line that goes from Kansas City to Lee Summit. And that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Every study that I have read, and if I'm wrong, you can send me the email on this, but when it comes to public transportation, if there is a efficient, fast, and affordable public transit system in any community, that increases economic development significantly. There's always a positive correlation there because people don't have to rely on an automobile to have a job. Okay, because if we actually think about it, having an automobile is very expensive. You purchase a car, you lease a car, you have insurance, you have to pay gas, you have to pay maintenance, and there's a lot of families in Jackson County that cannot afford those costs. And so if they can't afford a vehicle or to maintain a vehicle, then they have to rely on our public transportation system. But unfortunately, in Kansas, now I'm just specifically talking about Kansas City, folks, not about Jackson County, but Kansas City, our public transportation system is bad and it's going to get worse. We've already seen the articles that the KCATA is planning to reduce our bus lines again and make it even harder for a Jackson County or a Kansas City resident to get from one place in Kansas City, right? We need to reverse the tide. It is unacceptable that in the 1950s, we had better public transportation than we do today. And that's a fact. Like, you could have taken the street tram from Kansas City all the way south to Martin City back in the 1950s, and now you can't even do that. I mean, you could actually take the street tram all the way up to St. Joseph. It was very, uh, you know, it's crazy to think about that we actually had a public transportation line that connected St. Joseph to us. So we need to change that. We have to start investing in ourselves, folks. And when I say in ourselves, I mean into Jackson County. If we have a true rapid bus transit line that is fast, efficient, and reliable, then that line, I promise you, will cause a boon to our economy, okay? Because people won't have to live in the cities in order to go to work. So that means a person in Blue Springs can stay in Blue Springs if their work is in Grandview because they can rely on the rapid bus transit line to take them to work on time, okay? And that's what I'm promising you. Now, and this is what's at stake, because the other people that are running, in my opinion, are not running to change Jackson County. They're not running to reform our county, okay? They're running for a position, for a title. And that's the saddest thing, I think, that we have in this whole entire election is people don't have a drive to actually, not even a drive, a vision for what Jackson County should look like, except me. So please, folks, again, just talk to your friends, family members about this race. We have a lot at stake. And hold on a second. I'm going to pull this up. Now let's talk about what happened this week, because it's crazy. It is crazy. And also, if you have any questions for me, please leave a comment. I will get to them. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty, so I won't be able to put comments on page on Facebook, but I'll read them out loud at the end if you have any questions about me or my campaign, or about what occurred this week. But just leave your questions in the comments. So we had an article that dropped this week that specifically went into details about former chairman Manny Abarca's $50,000 contribution to, about his alleged bribery account. And this article was very explosive. And so I know that a lot of people didn't have the ability to go through this article. And so I want to provide, like, we're going to go through this article just so that people can see and understand what the story is right now. And remember, folks, people are innocent until they're proven guilty. And at this moment, these are all allegations, okay? But this is what it's being reported. So we're going to go through this, and we're also going to go through the $28,000 a Hawaii venture that some Jackson County legislators took, and then I'll take your questions. But let's go through this. So in the first paragraph, it basically states a political action committee backing Jackson County legislator Deron McGee received a $50,000 contribution, its largest ever, from a St. Louis campaign organization from earlier this year. The next month, that St. Louis organization received contributions totaling $50,000, its most ever from a single donor, tied to a Kansas developer that have led a pitch to build housing on Jackson County property. Legislators briefly considered the housing proposal in February before dismissing it a week later. Several officials voiced concerns about fast-tracking a valuable 99-year arrangement with the Olathe developer, Pat Campbell Properties. Remember that name. Pat, I think it's Pat, but it could be Pate. Let's call it Pate. Pate Campbell Properties, okay? Because you'll see the connection soon. The article continues. The outside contributions and housing proposal are now central to a political imbroglio that has rocked the Jackson County legislature and led the county sheriff to refer the matter to an outside investigation. And I believe when this reporter referred this matter to outside investigation, he's referring to when Daryl Forte made the public statement that now it's going to be a federally investigated, like the feds are actually investigating this right now. In the lead up to a competitive primary for county executive, some of the contributions first appeared in July 15th campaign finance reports filed with the Missouri Ethics Commission. The Kansas City Business Journal identified them after legislator Manny Abarca publicly alleged that the legislative aide offered him a $10,000 to $50,000 contribution to revisit and support the developer's housing application, and that the aide told him that McGee had accepted $50,000 under similar circumstances. So these are things that we already know, folks, but please bear with me because this article does get into detail about the whole connection line. The Jackson County legislator voted Abarca out as a body chair last week, citing general dysfunction under his leadership. Abarca remains a candidate for county executive facing an August 4th primary election. We already know that. The Kansas City Business Journal asked McGee for comment, and he acknowledged having received the request when the reporter briefly saw him after Monday's county legislature meeting. He did not contact the reporter or answer emailed questions before this article was published. Following the money, the McGee for Jackson County PAC on March 10th received $50,000 from STL, which stands for St. Louis Democratic Coalition. The two groups documented in quarterly reports to the Missouri Ethics Commission, which handles campaign finance records. That amount exceeds the $41,050 that McGee's PAC got from 88 past contributions. Combined between its inception in 2022, when McGee first ran for county legislature in 2025, those individual contributions ranged from $50,000 to $5,000. On April 15th, the St. Louis Democratic Coalition received $50,000 from a pair of $20,000 and $30,000 donations from Laura Campbell. Okay? Remember, the Pate Campbell Company. Okay? We're now talking about Laura Campbell. The PAC's quarterly reports listed Campbell as self-employed with an Olathe address. Jackson County has considered enlisting a group led by Pate Campbell Properties for housing development project. An application responding to a county request for qualifications for housing developers listed Joseph Campbell and Laura Pate Campbell as representatives for Pate Campbell. The Johnson County property records and loan documents show that Joseph and Laura Campbell are married, and unrelated federal campaign finance records are linked to Pate Campbell, show an Olathe address for the couple. Laura Campbell's contributions to the St. Louis Democratic Coalition stand out. The $20,000, $30,000 amounts easily were the two biggest out of the 76 individual contributions to the PAC reported since its creation in 2020. The other 74 contributions ranged from $100 to $10,000. The $50,000 from Campbell more than tripled what the organization received from its next largest repeated donor. And then we're going to continue with, in October, Laura Campbell contributed $5,000 directly to McGee for Jackson County. So they're in that part, they're kind of just establishing like Laura Campbell's connection with Deron McGee, but we're going to continue. In an email to Jackson County Sheriff Darrell Forte earlier this month, Abarca alleged legislative aide Calvin Williford had offered him $10,000 to $50,000 in political contributions in exchange for supporting Pate Campbell housing bid after the legislatures previously had withdrawn it. In his email, viewed by the Kansas City Business Journal, Abarca also said Williford told him $50,000 had been offered and received by McGee in a form of a contribution contingent on approval of a contract in a company that had previously received a federal indictment for something in Kansas. Williford previously was chief of staff to former county executive Mike Sanders. In 2018, and this is going into how they went to jail for their alleged campaign finance fraud. Williford has denied Abarca's allegations. Joseph Campbell, an employee in December, were indicted in the United States District Court, in the District Court of Kansas, for counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and making false statements regarding a collective $2.03 million received through two federal pandemic area loan programs. The criminal case remains pending as of this week. So, just for clarification, folks, they were indicted. They still haven't been found guilty of these things, but this is what the Kansas City Business Journal is reporting. Joseph Campbell could not be reached for comment or cell phone, and so Laura Campbell's not speaking as to what happened. McGee withdrew his candidacy for Jackson County Executive on April 21st, citing a hope to spend more time for family. And they're basically saying that the latest quarterly report from McGee for Jackson County, filed July 15th, reflected $55,000 in cash on hand, and his PAC as receiving $42,000 cash on hand as of March 31st. So this is the specific part that I want everyone to pay attention to, because this is where we're getting into the whole Pate Campbell housing project, Deron McGee, Donna Payton, alleged connections in this circle. The Jackson County Legislature considered contracting with Pate Campbell Properties in February after multiple on and off attempts to find a developer who could build mixed income housing on county-owned property. Jackson County issued an RFQ from June 4th to June 17th, 2025. The RFQ later was marked in an online database as canceled. So basically, when a developer wants to, say if the Jackson County government had a project, say they wanted to, let's just say they wanted to build housing for people, they have to submit an RFQ, which is basically it's basically a request of information that they have to basically send in information showing that they have what their development project is, how much it's going to cost, and what what the parameters of the project is going to be. This is a legal requirement for a lot of projects that are involving government funds or taxpayer dollar government funded projects. So this RFQ, in this paragraph, they're basically saying that the RFQ was basically issued multiple times, okay? So it was issued in June 4th through the 17th, October 23rd, and November 18th, and then released again December 5th to December 23rd. And this is why it's important. Pate Campbell made its submission on this RFQ on December 18th, the day after the grand jury indictment against Joseph Campbell, and was one of the 4 developer applicants responding to the RFQ. Okay, so the day after Joseph Campbell was indicted, according to this article, they then submitted their information to Jackson County to be funded for this housing project, okay? The RFQ did not specify criteria for a project, okay? So this request that the Jackson County government sent out basically didn't have all the details that it needed, but said the county could work with a chosen developer to create a comprehensive, affordable housing project with completion goal of May 2026, ahead of the World Cup. As of January 27th, an internal county evaluation committee had scored 4 RFQ applicants based on their qualifications, experience, references, and pricing. The committee ranked Pate Campbell last among the parties, okay? One official on the committee said Pate Campbell has experience in residential development, but did not indicate affordable housing experience, okay? Now remember, and this is a picture of their housing site plan that they proposed to the Jackson County government. Now remember, out of the 4 people that applied, that submitted their request or their information into the Jackson County government, Pate Campbell ranked last, okay? We're going to continue. Multiple county legislators had questions at a February 2nd meeting in which they were asked to pass a resolution authorizing a development services contract and 99-year ground lease with Pate Campbell for an unspecified county site. Legislator Donna Payton and the resolution sponsor and Abarca's replacement as legislative chair had asked officials to pass a measure that same day. But legislator Sean Smith said he found it very strange that Pate Campbell, as the lowest scoring developer, had been recommended. They quote Sean Smith saying, "Oftentimes we go with not high scoring vendor, but it's important for us to ask questions of the selection committee and why they made this recommendation. Why did they make this recommendation if this wasn't how the scoring came out?" Legislator Megan Smith raised concerns about passing a resolution without having to undergo the county committee review process, the usual precursor before a final legislative vote. And this is also important, okay? So according to this article, 1, there was a recommendation to use Pate Campbell, even though they were the lowest scoring developer, right? But secondly, they didn't even go through the normal process of these applications, right? And so Megan Smith also commented on that. If approved, the measure would have vested final authority with the county's interim finance and purchasing director to negotiate a contract and release with Pate Campbell and allocate $3 million for housing construction costs, okay? And now next is a very important quote from Megan Smith. "We're bypassing the committee process on something that is a large-scale project without even having the opportunity to ask questions of not only just the bidding process, but also the developer that was selected. These procedures are in place by the legislature for a reason, and it gives me a lot of pause when we have to leapfrog over these procedures." now they're talking about Donna Payton, okay? Payton responded that Pate Campbell was the only developer that chose to build on the site once it was made known. She did not name a site, and the county's RFQ did not say where the officials wanted developers to build housing, though some attached an aerial site map near the Truman Sports Complex as possible Jackson County sites. Legislator Smith said the resolution's ambiguity combined with its final nature could spell, trouble for the county. And so ultimately, the legislators voted 7-1-1 to table the Pate Campbell resolution at the meeting. McGee was the lone no vote, with Jalen Anderson abstaining. Payton withdrew the measure a week later on February 9th without discussion. Okay, and that's where this article stops. Okay, so to just talk about some key points here, right? First, when the county submitted basically a request to developers, basically saying that they want to do a housing project and ask developers to come back with their proposals, we received 4 proposals. Pate Campbell was the lowest scoring proposal that was received. Okay, that's the first red flag. Secondly, during this process to find developers and to approve them for potentially receiving $3 million of our county funds, we didn't even go through the normal legislative process that we usually have to evaluate these contracts. Now, I believe from the article, like usually you have committees, right? Like subcommittees before it goes into the county legislature, the entire county legislature. And they basically, according to this article, bypass that entire process. But then when it was like, we have to understand that this resolution was presented by Donna Payton, and then when it moved to hold, McGee voted no, and then Donna Payton withdrew the measure a week later. And one more point to really press in, this RFQ was submitted literally after one of the main partners, which was the Joseph guy, was indicted by the District Court of Kansas, allegedly. And so we have the Pate Campbell Development Company not even being the best bid. We have one of the 2 partners being indicted by the Jackson County, or by the District Court of Kansas. We have allegedly some members of the Jackson County legislature not going through the correct processes to evaluate these contracts before making the recommendation to provide this entity with $3 million going on. And so we have a rushed process, and this measure was ultimately killed because of the questions the questions that needed to be asked, that were raised, the questions and concerns by the other legislators. Okay, this is why it's bad, is because Laura Campbell, according to this article, provided the $10,000 and $30,000 contributions to this St. Louis PAC, allegedly, that was then given to Deron McGee. And of course, with the allegations that came up a couple of weeks ago, there are allegations that this might have been tied to essentially bribery, right? And so this is what that whole article, explosive article that came out this week. If you want to read this article yourself, it is on the Kansas Business Journal. And to see this article, all you have to do, if you do not have a subscription to the Kansas Business Journal, is just go to the library and you can read it for free there. And it was made by Andrew Grumke, who did a phenomenal job with reporting. Next, before we go to questions, is the article about Jackson County government, the $28,000 to Miami, okay? And I'm just going to briefly just go through this because this whole situation with Miami, or not Miami, sorry, Hawaii is just a complete mess. So, uh, long story short, uh, we have Manny Abarca and Vanessa Husky and their aides allegedly spending $28,000 to go to Hawaii for this conference that allegedly has nothing to do with the affairs of Jackson County, because the conference has more to do with the counties on the western side of the United States than with the Midwest side where we're involved of the United States. And so they basically go into the expenses that were made to finance this vacation. And all I have to say, folks, is, essentially like, what do you expect? It's like this is what we're dealing with in Jackson County. Is how can I say this? I'll say this as a small business owner, okay? I've been a small business owner now for 8 years, and with a small as like being a small business owner, I am accountable for every expenditure that my business has. Like every dollar has weight, and I do not like I cherish every single dollar that my firm earns because it means that for another day, I can provide services to my community. Some people just don't have that mentality, especially when it comes to money that isn't that they didn't have to hustle for, okay? Because it's different when you're given a so say let's say uh like for instance, as an attorney, I have to take classes every year to continue my to continue my legal license every year, right? And sometimes I have to pay for those classes. So say if like one class costs $360, right? I have to pay $360 of my own money to pay for that class. So it is an expenditure that I feel, right? But what the legislature is doing is when they're spending these expenditures, this isn't money that they spent their blood, sweat, and tears earning. This is taxpayer dollars. And so what seems to happen with and this isn't just a government issue. This stems with a lot of people who I believe just don't know the weight of a dollar, that don't have a concern for spending taxpayer dollars. Because like for me, look, if I went to Hawaii, I would 100% finance it on my end. I would not use taxpayer dollars for that because we need those taxpayer dollars to, for instance, fix the front door in Jackson County. We don't need the taxpayer dollars to finance a vacation for me in Hawaii. But some people don't have that mentality. And that's why, again, folks, I'm telling people, please, please vote. Tell your friends and family members to vote this year in the primary race because we need to get some of these people out of government. There has been enough evidence that have been or that we have realized over the years that some of these people just are not fit for office, and we need to start fresh. We need to modernize and reform Jackson County government, and the only way to do that is to have fresh leadership in place. Now, I did just publish an essay called uh, with this title called "For the Love of Jackson County," and one of the points that I raised is one of the points that's being talked about a lot by people who are against my campaign, and they're trying to find any reason to discredit me. And I want people to pay attention to this. They're not arguing that my policy is bad. They're not saying that, oh, my policy is better than Stacey Lake. In fact, these people have stolen political points or policy points that I made in the Jackson plan and put it into their campaign because, you know, there's for some of them there's a lack of imagination and creation for them to actually perceive a vision for a new Jackson County. But that's another topic for another time. Now they're basically saying, oh, Stacey doesn't have political experience. She doesn't have the experience to have this position. But folks, like I said in my essay, we do not need political insiders. We need fresh, new leadership in Jackson County government. And as your next Jackson County executive, I will root out the corruption because I am not controlled by any special interest groups. That is not what a lot of the people that are running for county executive can say. And this is important, folks, because when we look at the history of Jackson County, it was career politicians that created the chaos. And it needs to stop. And the only way that we can ensure that Jackson County gets reform and modernization is if we elect a person that is not a political insider, that is not being bought by these special interest groups, that has not pledged allegiance to an organization. And the only person that fits those qualifications is me. And so please, folks, vote for me on Tuesday in this primary for Jackson County Executive. I promise that I will do the best in my ability to reform and modernize Jackson County. I will audit the county. I will find out where your money went, and I will hold anybody accountable that's discovered in this audit if any illegality is discovered. But we have to give our county a chance, folks. And the only person that is willing to do the hard work that is needed for Jackson County to become the best county government, not only in Missouri but in the United States, is me. So please, folks, vote Stacey Lake on August 4th, 2026 primary. So I'm going to take some questions. Oh, and I'm going to take one person talked about public transportation. I've already talked about public transportation. As your next Jackson County executive, public transportation is going to be a focus. And that is something that I've been pioneering since 2022. But I am going to take a question, which I see is from Becky, that says, does the executive have any control over the legislature? And that's a great question, Becky. So technically speaking, the executive branch and the legislative branch are two separate branches, where you have the county executive, who basically oversees the Jackson County functions, but and then the legislature basically they pass or they approve or they deny ordinances that gives funding to certain projects with the budget. Okay, I'm probably not explaining that as clearly as possible, but basically, so with that said, is the legislature has their legislative function, and the county executive has basically an administrative managerial function over the departments and over the budget. However, the county executive has a veto power over any ordinance that the Jackson County legislature approves, right? So if the Jackson County legislature doesn't or approves an ordinance that the county executive doesn't agree with, the Jackson County executive can veto that ordinance, and then that ordinance has to be passed with a majority of 6 votes. But in terms of control, so charter wise, that's like kind of the control, like the checks and balances between the executive and the legislature. But in terms of control, the in a well functioning government, the county executive and the legislature are supposed to be working together to ensure that the government is functioning properly. So if the county executive has a proposal, for instance, fixing the front steps of the Jackson County Courthouse, right? If that's a priority of the county executive can create a budget for those maintenance issues and then work with the legislature for a legislator to put together an ordinance that would provide financing to a construction company to make those repairs to the county front steps. That's kind of how like leadership is supposed to happen in the county government, but it really hasn't been working that way for years now because and I'm not going to go into the Phil Lavoda interim because he's only been interim for um, 10 months now. But in terms of Frank White kind of lived as a man in a tower, so he didn't really have a lot of interactions or communications, as I heard, with the Jackson County legislature. So there was a break in communication there. But as your next Jackson County executive, I'm going to ensure that collaboration is like a prior when it comes to working with the legislature. I think that we should start, instead of starting the budgeting process in November, I think the budgeting process should start in the springtime, and we should work together with the legislature to make sure that we have the best budget in November instead of springing on what the budget is in November and only give the legislature 30 days to decide if this is really the best budget or how to amend it. So like those little types of reforms, that's what I plan to do as the next Jackson County executive. So Christy writes, thank you for acknowledging the lack of ADA compliance in the county. Yes, that's something that really gets me mad. People like people just don't understand the experience of that other people might have if they don't have a disability in some ways. And so we have to make sure that the county building is accessible for us all because if it's not accessible for every single resident in our county, then that is a great injustice. And so like the leadership has a responsibility to make sure that our government buildings are accessible for us all. And when I'm talking about accessibility, one of the things I like to think about is you have handicapped accessible and then handicap friendly, right? There could be a ramp that goes like a good example of this is how sometimes in some county buildings you have ramps that that zigzag a ridiculous length of space to connect to the building, right? Those types of infrastructure is it like that is technically handicap accessible, but it's not handicap friendly. Like it's still going to be hard for a person who either uses a wheelchair or has to go up a ramp instead of going through the stairs to use that ramp to access that door, right? So we have to make sure that our buildings are not just handicap accessible, but they're handicap friendly, and that's what I'm going to do as your next Jackson County executive. Yes, yes. Christy brings up a great point that the ADA was signed into law 36 years ago. No excuse at this point for noncompliance. I mean, I agree, right? But it's kind of like that saying in the famous Watchmen comic, who watches the Watchmen, right? If no one's getting sued for this, then, they're just going to go on business as usual. And that's how the Jackson County government has basically been operating. And so they've been operating in non-compliance for years. kicking the can down the road. But as your next Jackson County executive, I'm going to ensure that doesn't happen. Yes, the county is covered until like under Title II of the ADA. Yeah. So, does anybody have any other questions? Because otherwise, I'm going to end this stream because it's nearing 7 o'clock. Just to quickly go over the public transportation, because I see that some people on YouTube are talking about the public transportation, is my idea for a rapid bus transit line system in Jackson County is essentially we would have 4 lines. Um, One that would go from Kansas City to Oak Grove, one that would go from Kansas City to Lone Jack, and one that would go from Kansas City to Martin City, and then a diagonal line that would go from Grandview to Independence that would connect the other 3 lines together. And each of the lines would be 20 to 25 miles per hour long with 7 to 8 stops, making it possible for a person to take the rapid bus transit line and get from city to city faster by taking that line than by actually driving a car. And to make a transit system like that, that actually encourages people not to use their cars, but actually to use the public transit system. So that's what I'm going to do as your next Jackson County executive. So I see that there's no more questions. Thank you again for coming to my Let's Talk Jackson. If you are watching this podcast when we're not live, but you have a question, please feel free to leave a question, and I will get back to you. But also, I want to plug in Kansas City Business Journal, the reporter Thomas Frystand, I think that's his name, who wrote this amazing article on the whole allegations of the alleged bribery scheme. When I read it, I was thoroughly impressed. I thought that the reporting was very well researched, and everyone needs to know what's going on in our Jackson County government, and we need more detailed, in-depth reporting like the one that Thomas Frystand did. So thank you so much, Thomas, for writing that amazing article in the Kansas Business Journal. So with that said, remember, Tuesday is D-Day. Please vote. Please tell your friends to vote. Please tell your family to vote. And I will see you on Tuesday. One last pitch. This Tuesday at 7 p.m., I'm having my election night party at Cliff's Tap House, which is on 31st and Gillum. So if you have time between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. on Tuesday night, please swing by, grab a plate of food, support a local business in Kansas City, and hopefully join in a celebration party. Anyways, I will see you then. Have a great night, everyone, and thank you for coming and listening to my podcast today. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.